So hello, everyone. Very excited to be with you all. I wanted to give my thanks to Go Elite, to Ryan and to Astrid and your whole team, Ryan, for inviting me to speak with everyone today about our immigration journey through U.S. employment. We're just kind of basically, I love having these types of sessions, especially for people who are early on in their career, they're early on in their education. I get to speak with you all at these kinds of early stages, and you can learn what will be different points that you might find along your immigration journey and that life cycle from F1 to H1B to green card, perhaps other types of statuses as well. So that's what we're really going to delve into today. And just to give you all a little bit of information about myself. So as Ryan said, I'm a partner with Siskind Susser. We are an immigration law firm in Memphis, but we work with clients all across the world, really, and several different industries as well. My background, while our firm does all of U.S. immigration essentially, my focus is primarily on physicians, researchers, faculty, and students. That's where especially in that academic immigration area, that's where I have my focus. I am part of a lot of different organizations, the types of university personnel that you might encounter, designated school officials, et cetera. I do a lot of work with them through my memberships in NAPSA and presentations with them and things of that sort as well. I also put out a publication called the Academic Immigration Handbook that has a big focus on student immigration, scholar immigration, and even goes into green cards as well. So that's enough about me. So I just want to tell you all a little bit about what we're going to cover today. Ryan helped me sort of orient, in terms of things that you all might be most interested in about, in terms of politics and economics and, going further into different types of non-immigrant options like H1Bs. What about other types of options apart from the H1B because it's so competitive? Day one CPT was one of those, and other types of statuses as well that we can talk about. We can talk about green card processes. We can talk about layoffs that might occur along the way. And then we want to make sure to leave a lot of time for questions as well. So I just wanted to show you all, for those not as familiar with respect to the F1 International Student Life Cycle, so you all could just see that, typically the first 9 months of one's student, time as a student in the U.S. is primarily in terms of work authorization, would probably be on-campus employment. Again, unless we're in this type of day one CPT situation, which we'll talk about. And then other types of options continue to open up throughout that time as a student, including curricular practical training, pre-completion optional practical training, which is similar in a lot of ways, special economic hardship for those who are having difficulty and they need work authorization for those reasons, internships in international organizations. Then we have our graduation, right? And the graduation then leads to other types of training options like post-completion optional practical training. And then finally, a lot of our conversation is going to be on this last stage as well. Is there a STEM extension that's possible for a student who may have a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics course of study? Will the person be trying to get an H1B or trying to get some other type of status, move on to a green card process, maybe even return to school as an F1 student, either for career purposes or just because there was difficulty with an H1B lottery process, and they're looking at sort of just brightening their prospects later down the road. So the trends here. So when I first started preparing this presentation for you all, it was President Biden versus President Trump. But it looks like almost in this picture, he's kind of pointing to Kamala Harris, isn't he? So, we have we have the duo of the Biden-Harris administration. So we know the prospects of having a Harris administration is going to be very similar in many ways to how immigration has looked under President Biden. And then we have really a stark contrast with President Trump. Both of them have, just brought these different, very different philosophies, I guess you could say, related to immigration. And it's important for you all to know about that, right? Because we're coming into this election year. And, under the Biden administration, it has certainly been more encouraging, at least when it comes to legal immigration. There's been some very good STEM-related policies, widening who can apply for STEM OPT, widening the possibility of self-petitioned or even employer-sponsored green card processes for those who were in the STEM fields. And we know that under President Trump, it was maybe more of a restrictionist type of immigration regime. There were a lot of higher rates of denials and requests for evidence in the H1B context. At some point, it was 21%, 24% denial rates for H1Bs. And that has typically been in the single digits, and it has been in the Biden presidency as well. There were other types of travel bans and restrictions of that sort as well. So, I know there's been some, and you and I were talking about this, Ryan, of some conversations I think that President Trump had with on a podcast, and I wanted to try to address it. I think it was something like, if you graduate from college, you should automatically get a green card attached to sort of your diploma, right? And I think that the message I would have for you all is to judge more the actions, not the words, right? And that's really more of the measure of a person. And that was a podcast where he was talking to venture capitalists and who were looking to get highly skilled talent to the US. So, I think it was maybe more lip service that was given in the moment, because we know that it's been more restrictionist, and he has surrounded himself with those that, are more restrictionist in terms of their thinking. They just want to limit immigration altogether. So just be mindful of that. Now, I will say, regardless, right? Regardless of these different philosophies on immigration, there are real challenges in this country, things that really would see a huge boost from more immigration into the U.S. One of the things that I'll just say, offhand, is that we have a very low unemployment rate right now. When President Biden came in, it was about 6.3, and now it's 4.1 unemployment. And there are very large shortfalls. The Federal Reserve said this in 2022, that there is a shortfall because of a plunge in net immigration at that time. And it is also something that's been felt very dramatically in the Midwest part of this country, where you have Republican governors. This is back in 2023, 2 Republican governors who were asking for the ability for their states to be able to sponsor immigration directly, right? Have a state-sponsored immigration. There was very recently, if you think that that's already dated, there was recently a conference of mayors where they put together a resolution asking for heartland visas. They know that in particular areas, right, outside of the big metropolitan areas, they are losing, their population's decreasing, there's stagnant economics, and they really need the revitalization and the dynamic just growth that immigration can supply and entrepreneurialism can supply. So regardless of the philosophy, this really isn't going away. And it's not just a US problem, it's a global problem. And that's why there's a lot of competition also, for you all. There's competition in different countries and things of that sort too. And so that's why we're so hopeful that, we will have very good common sense policies that really align with economic realities in this country. And we'll really see what results from the election. It is certainly possible. I don't want to be all a naysayer about what a President Trump administration might look like. It's possible that something, that there could be some nod to where we really have great need in this country. And, we're seeing that in various industries as well, including the healthcare industry. So I just want to mention that to you all. There's a Think Immigration piece that I had put out that was related to this as well. It is called the unchanging H1B cap in a changed country. It's from the Think Immigration blog that the American Immigration Lawyers Association puts out. And it has a lot of that context. It was something that I wrote last year. The other thing is many of you maybe have been aware of different layoffs that have happened in the tech industry. And while I don't claim to be an economist, my understanding is a lot of this had to do with overhiring during the pandemic. I wouldn't myself perceive it as a trend that you will see far into the future. I think it's more of a rebalancing than anything. And I think that a lot of these shortfalls are going to really remain, and there's going to be the need for common sense immigration in this country. So, life after F1, we're mostly going to dwell on H1Bs, and you'll see we'll talk about some of these other types of statuses, and we'll talk about green cards and back to F1 as well. So the H1B is certainly the most common. This is really the quintessential high-skilled, non-immigrant visa category, the working category. And it is for those who will be employed in a specialty occupation, which requires at least a bachelor's degree or higher in a specific specialty. And of course, the employee has to meet the requirements, has to have at least a bachelor's degree or its equivalent, and has to meet the minimum requirements for the job and any necessary licenses as well. And the employer has to pay them at least a baseline wage level that's determined through Department of Labor salary surveys, and of course, sponsor the individual. The current H-1B climate is great in terms of adjudications. Like when you are able to file an H-1B, they're in the single digits in terms of any type of denials. And it's really, it's a good environment adjudications-wise. The big issue is really more the numerical caps, which I want to show you all, actually. I'll show you in the next page about that. It's very competitive. There are 85,000 slots that are available every fiscal year. There are also the possibility of receiving cap-exempt H-1Bs, and those are things that come through institutions of higher education, right? Universities that are hiring you on as staff or as faculty or research, nonprofits related to or affiliated with those universities. A lot of times in the healthcare work that I do, nonprofit hospitals that have affiliation agreements with universities to train residents. You will see a lot of cap-exempt possibilities there, and also nonprofit and government research organizations. So being employed by or being employed physically at those locations can make for a way around this very, very competitive cap. Let me put it in perspective for these 85,000 numbers for you all. So the last time it was touched, the last time the cap was touched was back in 2005. There was a 65,000 cap it's reduced slightly by the H1B1 program for Chilean and Singaporean nationals. Then the master's cap in 2005 came. It added 20,000 additional numbers for those who have a U.S. master's or above. At the time, that was a lot. That seemed like it was going to shore up the H1B program for a while and be responsive to need. Yet, we know that it's not the case. But I'll tell you all a couple of other things that the way the world looked back in 2005. YouTube had just been founded. Now, I think maybe, Ryan, you might be posting this to YouTube. I think it's been around for a minute, right? It's been around for a little while now. The first iPhone was still 2 years away, and Donald Trump's show, The Apprentice, was airing seasons 3 or 4. And now he's already, been a president and is running for the presidency again, okay? This is what the numbers look like as of the last few years. And when you see this term registration, basically that was put into place some years ago, where there is now this initial lottery that happens, where these bare bones sort of entries are put in around March. And if a person is selected around that time, they can actually file the big physical H-1B petition, at least their employer does for them, starting on April 1st and usually until June 30th. And then they can finally start working October 1st. So that's what registrations mean. Now, if you look at these numbers here, 2021, can you see this when I move this, Ryan? I guess you guys can see kind of what I'm highlighting there. That's good.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. So yes, I'll show you all, like you can see down the row here that these registrations have been increasing. Now, don't pay too much attention to last year's number of registrations. Really, this was a situation where certain employers were kind of gaming the system and were gathering together to file multiple registrations for individuals. Anyway, it was since taken care of by a recent rule that came out before the current year. And as you can see, wow, that's a pretty dramatic reduction, right? That's not natural, nor was the rise of this amount of registrations in the first place. But when you look at 479,000, actually it was 470,000 eligible registrations. That is more or less the real number. You know, you have a few that were filed, you know, companies filed multiple registrations, but the person was only counted once. But this shows you true demand in this country for only 85,000 slots, right? To put that in perspective, that's like a 17% chance of selection. Now, that's not, that makes more sense, I guess you could say, for like bachelor's cap level. There is definitely, when somebody gets a US master's degree or above, they have increased their odds of getting selected because they'll be put in this lottery for the 65,000 numbers. And then if they are not selected there, they'll be moved to the master's cap and they can be selected from one of the other additional 20,000 numbers. So as you can see, and that's like a tip I'll give you all, is, you know, to have a US master's degree, definitely you fare better in the lottery process. It's still competitive, but you fare better. The other thing I will say is not discounting the you know, possibilities that and options that OPT and, you know, the possibility of STEM OPT provide to you, or even multiple years of CPT while you're in the course of study. You know, each of those types of situations, you may already have an employer who is willing to file for you in the lottery. And if you get multiple opportunities, you know, you could have 3 or more opportunities potentially to be put into the lottery. And that also allows you several chances to get selected. So that's something to think about. And you have to kind of play that type of long game when you have these types of numbers until Congress actually does something and moves, you know, with immigration. The other thing I was telling you all when I mentioned about political trends and all those types of things is just to, you know, to understand that it's mostly there's these dramatic differences from administration to administration because a lot of immigration is guided by executive branch decisions because Congress is so deadlocked and hasn't passed comprehensive immigration reform in decades, right? So be aware of that too. Cap gap is, I don't want to dwell too much on this, but, you know, cap gap is basically a way to bridge, as I was mentioning to you all, you know, you can't start on a cap subject H1B until October 1st. And if your OPT is ending in April, May, June, as is very common, you need a way to bridge until October 1st. And the way that you do that is by filing, if you're selected in the lottery and you file that substantive H1B, is to be able to file that before the expiration of your OPT. And a lot of times that can work because you have between April 1st and June 30th to file that petition and has to be filed before the end of that OPT. So let's just talk about a few other types of statuses outside of H1B. One of them is the O1 petition. This is for those who have extraordinary ability in sciences, arts, education, business, athletics, right? We do it a lot for our scientists, our researchers, you know, performers, athletes. It works for some industries better than others, just in the way the box checking happens by USCIS, right? But they're looking at, you know, awards and critical and leading or critical and essential roles that one has had, original contributions of major significance. Just be aware of it. It's not as unlikely as it may seem, you know, and sometimes in certain periods, the adjudications are better than in other administrations. There is no cap. There are no prevailing wage requirements. You do need an employer to sponsor it, but there's no limit to how long you can hold O1 status. TN would be for those who, you know, I know our audience is largely Chinese, Indian students, et cetera, right? And so the TN status doesn't necessarily apply, but I know of, several clients we have that, have a country birth maybe in India, but have after acquired nationality in Canada. And so it's something to just be aware of, that it's similar in many ways to H1B status, but there are a list of occupations and credentials that one must have to hold TN status. There are other nationality type statuses as well, for Australians, Singaporeans, Chilean nationals, etc. L1 status it's helpful to be aware of. It doesn't really apply to everybody, but if you have an employer that has a global presence, right? Maybe has some foreign offices and there's a relationship among as subsidiaries or as affiliates, right? And you are trying for the lottery with that US entity, but you're not selected in the lottery. If it's possible, and we've seen this happen in certain cases, that you can work for the foreign office, the foreign entity, for 1 year, you may be able to then transfer back as a manager, or as a specialized knowledge employee. So that's really the type of strategy. That's kind of how it works in that situation. You might be able to be an intercompany transferee from abroad. That's L1 status. And then we have our J1s. Sometimes they can apply, possibly for trainees, but I will say that a lot of times in the trainee category, it is has to be a relationship to your education in your home country, right? Like it's not like optional practical training or CPT that is related to, it's work related to your US degree. Being a trainee is work related to your experience or your education abroad. So it doesn't apply to everybody, but I want you all to be aware of it. Some individuals have, family members that they can transfer, right? Children to parents, spouses, right? Can be able to get possibly a dependent status under their parent, under their spouse, maybe even have work authorization through it. So be aware of that. And then finally, let's talk about going back to school, right? And let's talk about CPT just generally. It has to be part of an integral part of an established curriculum. You have to be the work has to be directly related to the major area of study. And the person works not with like a physical employment authorization document, but the I-20 that they get, they need a recommendation from their university. So that's CPT. What makes it day one CPT? Well, there's kind of two flavors of day one CPT that I think you all would want to be aware of. So the first thing is that by regulation, CPT is an exception to having to have that one academic year before you can apply for CPT. And it's an exception for those who are enrolled in graduate studies that require immediate participation in curricular practical training. Okay, so there may be, and it's common for that requirement of internships and this type of training in various industries, including in business, in healthcare. You will see this. So and there and maybe in other types of programs as well. Certainly not just limited to those types of industries. So be mindful of this. The other thing that's interesting about it is think about the scenario where a person did a whole course of study. They had that one academic year. They did a whole bachelor's degree and they did their OPT, and then they went into a master's degree right after that, or they went into another course of study. Have they disrupted that one academic year that they've already accrued, right? I mean, I think arguably not, right? That they could, if the school is willing to support them for CPT, that they would be eligible for an immediate CPT that way as well. So I think that that's another thing that's interesting to note, right? For those who are returning back to school. What I will say to you all is it's very important to protect yourself. There are different things, different types of services and things you'll see online about, about day one CPT this and different types of, institutions where there's not really any type of, curriculum happening, learning happening, right? And I'm sure, Go Elite has probably told you all the same thing in a lot of other types of, while providing this type of education, right? CPT is curricular practical training. It is curriculum led, right? And it's important for you all to do your research very carefully and connect with the right services that can help you and provide that type of guidance for you, right? You also want to learn what support and services your school is going to offer if the day one CPT is potentially questioned. I've seen some, schools where they will upcharge students, to provide letters or to provide support if day one CPT gets questioned. And I think you just want to be aware of what you're getting into. If that's if that's fine and that's workable for you, and it's really just to cover just resources devoted to helping with this. That's one thing, but you just want to make sure that you're aware of fees and you're aware of support should day one CPT get questioned. The risks are questions by USCIS during the change of status. And that's usually, I mostly see that as a change of status to H1B. That's where I've really seen those RFEs come into effect. It could also be difficulty renewing the F1 if you're engaged in day one CPT. I haven't seen a lot of that though. It depends on the particular consulate, right, and what their what the culture is at that particular embassy. And the other thing, right, for those of you who want OPT and you want STEM OPT at the very end, just to be aware that 365 days of full-time CPT, right, over 20 hours a week, will remove the OPT option. So that could be shutting down potentially, 36 months of training, right? So you want to be mindful of that. And if you've thought about it carefully, many of our clients may choose to have multiple years of CPT, and they do it eyes wide open, right? And maybe it's an entrepreneur who then will ultimately be able to get O1 extraordinary ability status at the end, right? It has a really good case for that. So just be aware of that. A couple of other things I'll say, right, about CPT is, the school, when I say the whole thing about protecting yourself, right, the school must have an academic infrastructure set up, right? There should be a course catalog. You're actually enrolling in classes and you know who the faculty supervisor is. There's actually academic deliverables that you will be, producing papers, taking exams, and that you are physically going to campus for some period of time, that there's some requirement or something that you will be coming up for a certain symposium or to engage in an exam toward the end, right? That's a lot of things that we see in some of these day one CPT, requests for evidence from the government are, they want to know information about when you've been on campus and those sorts of things as well. So that's what I'll say about day one CPT. So I'll just mention also the green card process to you all. There's a labor certification green card process that is the most common type of process. It's basically vetting the job offer and providing, and there's recruitment related to that job to vet it before U.S. workers in the geographic area, right? To make sure there are no minimally qualified U.S. workers for the job. It does take a lot of time. It may not be able to be concluded even if you have a lot of time as an F1 student, especially with green card backlogs, which are more ever present really across the board. It used to be mostly China and India, but you're seeing it really across the board as well. So those types of green card processes make it so that it might not be concluded during the course of study, but it does give you a place in line. It gives you the possibility of getting H1B extensions down the road. There are other types of green cards, national interest waivers. Those are self-petitioned green card options for those who are doing work of national importance and substantial merit. And then there are ones that, you fare better when there are green card backlogs, like extraordinary ability green cards, marriage to a U.S. citizen, which is completely outside of any of these country quotas if you find love while you're in the university or early in your working career. And so you all can just kind of see this is not the full picture, but final action dates, India and China, you can see for EB2 and EB3, that's like bachelor's degree positions, advanced degree positions. And then you can see it's a lot better when we're talking about extraordinary ability green cards, outstanding researcher green cards. There's less of a backlog there. The last thing I'll say, just with my remaining time before we open this for Q&A, layoffs. Layoffs can happen. We saw a lot of this in the tech industry. And prior to 2017, it was a lot more difficult to take that H1B and to transfer to another employer because there really would have to be a deal worked out with that employer, that prior employer, right, to have them have that layoff coincide with when you filed your H1B for a new employer. It left people scrambling, really, especially if they didn't have, a long severance period, for example. But with the 60-day grace period, you have this additional time and you can file the H1B, the new H1B during that 60-day grace period. Now, that is discretionary. It's technically a discretionary grace period, but it is widely granted, unless there's something different or odd in one's background. There are other grace periods for J1, for F1 if people get laid off. There's also OPT employment time if somebody is not, working the entire time of OPT. There is unemployment time. 90 days for post-completion, 150 days when you're considering post-completion OPT and STEM OPT. And then we're just kind of looking at some of these other, the back-to-school option that we talked about, possibility of day one CPT. Self-petition green cards like national interest waivers, probably more extraordinary ability just given green card backlogs again. There's also something called compelling circumstances employment authorization, and that is not widely utilized. It's been taking a long time. I'm hoping that because the government is talking more about these EADs, that maybe they're trying to really make it a more robust program. Just in the way that, there's there's entrepreneurial parole for entrepreneurs. They're talking more about that. That was something that you just didn't really see approvals before. But it gives the person not a status in the US, but a means to work in the US. And so I'm going to just turn it over to Q&A. I know that's a lot of information to take in, but I want to leave time for you all to answer your questions, and we can look at any more of these concepts that I've covered in the questions.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you so much, Adam, for this very thoughtful presentation. We actually learned a lot from different aspects in terms of immigration journeys. And everybody, I wanted to remind you that if you have questions, please send that directly to the Q&A box so our teammates can collect all of them. And hopefully with Adam, we can answer all of them for you. I see some people sending that into the chat. So if you don't mind, please direct them into the Q&A. And Adam, do you mind if I go ahead and share my screen so we can get this Q&A
Please.
started?
Yeah, I
All
will
right.
stop share here. There we go.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Let me just twist it a little bit.
I
So
can.
here
Yeah.
are the questions we have. So first one, this person wanted to know when in the green card process is the employee safe if the company lays off or fires them, or will they have to start over for the whole process? This is a very typical question.
Yeah, and it's a good question. It really also depends a lot on the particular green card process too, right? Because you have to distinguish employer-sponsored processes from self-petition processes, right? Like if you have a national interest waiver that's self-petitioned, as long as you are remaining in the field, right? As long as you're doing work that is of national importance and substantial merit, you are still okay, you are still okay to keep that process moving. I see it most commonly, I would say, in the perm process where these questions come up, right? And I will say there are different benchmarks, right, in terms of what safety looks like. So first off, you have your, the filing of your perm, and you have your, and that's a long process. But after that's certified, actually, I'm sorry, the filing of the perm gets you your place in the green card line, okay? After the perm gets certified and your I-140 petition gets filed and it gets approved, that locks in that place in line, okay? So that doesn't mean the whole green card moves, but it means your place in line, which is very important when you have these long backlogs. That place in line has not been disrupted when you move to another, employer. I will say that, there can be issues sometimes if an I-140 petition is revoked. It can cause an issue if I think it's within the first 180 days of it having been approved. And we could talk more about that, but that is only if an employer were to withdraw an I-140, which doesn't happen very often. Honestly, I think of it as solely punitive. I can't think of any good reason why anyone would withdraw an I-140. And I certainly don't advise anybody that I work with to do something like that. And I think it's pretty rarely done. The other thing I'll mention to you all is that the very final stage, right? So you have PERM, you have I-140 petition. The final one is the I-485 adjustment of status application. And once that gets filed, after it's been pending for 180 days, if it hasn't yet been approved, somebody can also move not just the priority date, but the green card process itself to another job in the same or similar occupation. So it can be with a different employer as long as it's in the same or similar occupation, like a software developer who has that type of job and moves to another software developer position, or something related, something similar, right? And that's a way to carry the green card with you to another employer. And finally, what does it mean if a person is laid off? They get that green card, right? And they get laid off right away, because you're supposed to work for that that employment, right? Upon receiving the green card. Well, the thing about that is that these types of things happen, right? And it doesn't mean that you haven't had the best of intentions to, work, for that employer. So I think it's really changed circumstances, and it's something where it might come up later in a naturalization interview. You're trying to get citizenship, and it looks like you left right after the green card was approved, and you might get questions about that. But if you were terminated, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't led by you. It was circumstances beyond your control.
Sounds good. That is a very comprehensive answer. Hopefully, we answered your questions. And let's move on to the second one. So this one is
Sure.
also, we get asked about this a lot, especially also for those of you who are on the earlier stage of immigration. So what does an RFE mean during the H1B petition?
So an RFE just means request for evidence. It just means that the government was not satisfied with the initial evidence that was provided, and they need some additional information in order to approve the case. They can be wide-ranging and substantive to something simple like, I can't read your passport biographical page. Can you please resend a copy?
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Adam. Let's move on. So how to make a career profile? I think this is more of a individual questions, personal questions. So how to make a career profile stronger for future immigration? Does education help? Work experiences? Does good company role, manager role helps as well? I think obviously all of them would help, but I wanted to hear from you, Adam. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of this, when people talk about career profiles and CVs and things of that sort, it's more gearing up to an O1 extraordinary ability status, or a national interest waiver green card, or an EB1 extraordinary ability green card, right? It's trying to make that profile increase for that selective, very subjective type of process, right? And, it really depends on your particular industry too. It's not necessarily just education or work experience, right? Work experience in the sense that maybe you worked in a critical and leading role, right? They're looking at things like that. They're looking at awards. They're looking at selective memberships that you have obtained, right? Like for entrepreneurs, there are certain, you have to prove your success as an entrepreneur to enter into certain organizations. What about if you're in the area of research? What does how many citations have you received, and how many first author publications? How much grant funding have you received, right? So it varies very much by industry. And I think, credentials also matter in another sense, right? Like whether you have a master's degree, US master's degree or above, or a master's cap petition, right? Whether you are part of, an EB2 for your green card preference category, or EB3, which it depends. Sometimes EB2 is an advanced degree that you have. If you have that, you qualify for EB2. It generally moves faster, not always, but it generally moves faster than EB3. which is, for positions that require a bachelor's degree. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next one. So this person is curious about after the perm is approved, what is a reasonable timeline to get the green card, to
Ah,
actually get the green card if this person doesn't come from China or India, is from like another region?
right, right. So this is after the perm is approved. So we're already, skipping probably a year and a half to 2 years ahead by the time the perm is approved, right? So the next things that happen, the I-140 petition is usually pretty fast, and it can be there can be expedited government processing for it. So, maybe a few months between preparation and approval. And then there is the I-485 adjustment application. Now that can be a bit of a wild card in the sense that, if you can file the 485, directly after the perm's approved, you're maybe looking at another 6 to 12 months altogether for that I-485 to be approved and the green card to be issued. But what I would stress to you all is the 485 is tied, as you all saw from that visa bulletin I put up, right? It's very much tied to how the visa bulletin moves. And, even for those who are not from China or India, there are backlogs, as you all can see, across the board right now. Didn't used to be that way a couple of years ago, but it is currently that way because of high demand and the same stagnant supply that we've seen since the 1990s, for immigrant visas. So, I think currently the backlog, I can't recall exactly what you all saw on the presentation there, but it might be like another year back. Actually, I think I can access it. So it's March 15th, 2023 for a final action date, which means the ultimate date. There's different charts on the visa bulletin, but the ultimate date is maybe about a year and a half off. So that could add to what I was just saying, another year and a half to the process. But the visa bulletin is very unpredictable. It doesn't move in a linear way. Month to month can look very, very different. But if you put in that, if you put in a year and a half that you were waiting, you might actually, because that priority date gets set when the perm gets filed, you might actually be able to file the I-1, the I-140 you could file, and then the 485, you might be able to file it right away, potentially. So it'd be maybe another year until you receive the green card. It just depends on when the perm was filed and what the visa bulletin looks like when you're getting ready to file the 485 and it can be approved.
Thank
So
you,
I
Adam.
hope that, I know that was a long answer.
No, this is very comprehensive. This is good. Moving on. So this person wanted to know this. I think this a lot of us also have these kind of concerns.
Sure.
So what would be the pathway towards green card after I get the H1B? Do the company make any actions for somebody to get the H1 to get the green card? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so what I'll tell you all, and this is more than an immigration question. It's really more of a, how do you engage with your employer to have these types of conversations? Because you can't assume that if an employer is filing an H for you, that they're also getting ready to work on the green card. Okay. Number one, not all employers file green card processes for every different type of employee. And number two, they might not even be aware of the need to do it, just depending on who the employer is. So you want to be an advocate for yourself. That doesn't mean that you necessarily need to go banging down the door, right? When you get that H1B and say, I want the H and I want the green card too. It's you have to kind of treat it diplomatically, right? But some, depending on the need, depending on the shortage in the industry, some employers may do green cards right away. It may be certain, probationary periods of a year, 24 months, 3 years, right? Um, you know, so 1 to 3 years, right? That they might actually get started and might be in the language of the offer letter or contract. It might not be, so it's good to kind of have those conversations. And just realize that if they're working on the H1B, that does not necessarily mean they're doing the green card. So there's no substitute for having those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also in our previous presentation, Adam speak a lot on the green card application side as well. So if you missed the first half of today's sessions, we will also send you the recording so you can go ahead and review that. All right, let's move on. This one will be more about day one CPT. So
Sure.
this person has a computer science master's degree and is planning to go for day one CPT and specifically on information studies. Some subjects he think or she thinks might be similar to the first master's. Just wanted to know more. And I think I personally can answer a little bit on this. And then Adam, if you wanted to add, feel free to do so. So I will have two advice in terms of going about day one CPT. One is to look into the curriculum and the classes. What specifically are you learning? You think, you said that computer science information studies, that seems like it's kind of similar in some field, but you actually have to take a look at your previous classes that you took and also the classes you're going for to see if they align. Do you have exactly same classes that couldn't be good for your future immigrations? So to consider that. So I do know that, different day one CPT schools offers information studies or information technology programs differently. And then the other thing is that if you wanted to go for day one CPT, consider your current employment if you have that. Your classes, again, your major that you decided to do have to align with your job duty. So if you wanted to do information studies, your job better have alignments with information studies. So that would be the two tips. If you wanted to share more about your unique personal cases, feel free to scan our WhatsApp code or WeChat code on the screen. Our consultant can take a look at your situations and provide free consultations to you. For
I couldn't
sure.
get any better, Ryan.
All right, thank you so much, Adam. And let's just move on. So this person just got the H1B. First, congratulations. And then also would like to know if I'm eligible to travel back home, given the H1B visa is not yet stamped on the passport. So let's just assume that is this year, like this person just got the H1B this year.
Right, right. So, I mean, that's very common, right? For somebody who is changing status, that they wouldn't already have a visa in their passport for that particular category. They changed within the US. So when they travel, right, they don't have to travel, but when they travel home, that is the time that they need to acquire the visa stamp in their passport, right? Because the visa is the ticket to present yourself for entry, with Customs and Border Protection. So that's when that would occur.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. Can I still file for H1B while in the process of doing a perm? Maybe this person didn't have a H1B before, of a EB2 or EB3.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, there's no contradiction there, right? Like the only issue here is like somebody who has a green card process going and they're in like an F1 student status is like them then traveling internationally and trying to come back in F1, right? That's something that's related to the F here. But the scenario being described here is somebody who does have a green card process, and is in an F1 status who wants to file like a change of status or to come back in H1B status. And that's perfectly fine. There's no contradiction between H1B and a green card process. And H1B is a dual intent status. And so it plays nicely with permanent residency
Sure.
and applying for it.
Mhm. Next questions, personal questions, and also very interesting ones. So if somebody marries a US citizen, can he or she still choose to be on H1B visa? What this process would be like?
Right. So marrying a US citizen, right? It doesn't in and of itself, the act of marriage, right, does not change one's status. It would make it more likely that that there might be a marriage-based green card process that occurs because it's a good way to finalize faster than anything else the green card, right? So a lot of people will, while they're in school and in an F1 or while they're in their career in H1B status, might apply for the marriage-based green card. And it's no issue, and I frequently recommend to my clients, even while they have that marriage-based, process underway, that they're still maintaining their H-1B status all the way until the green card gets approved. And then they're no longer an H, they're permanent residents at that point.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the next one. So if my former employer doesn't get a satisfied PWD, I don't understand what this is, so hopefully Adam can help out on this. So when I reach my 6-year H-1B limit and I decide to fire me, can I find a new employer to file EB-2 and get an extension on my H-1B?
Yeah, so I think this might be a situation like a PWD is a prevailing wage determination. So, like, maybe the prevailing wage determination came back too high. It meant the wage was too high for what the employer would actually be able to pay. And so they decided, just we're going to have to abandon this. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to that an employer could potentially do, but if they just settled on it's too high, then let's see, when I reach my 6-year limit, decides to fire me. Can I find a new employer to file EB-2 and get an extension without the need of a lottery? There's a lot of different elements to this question. I think what I would say here is, the person might still be able to get an H-1B. It just depends on how much time they have left in their H, whether they have any H-1B recapture time from time that they were outside the US during that H-1B period. Maybe, if they don't have a satisfied PWD, I guess they don't have a green card process underway, although they might have a prior green card process that allows them extension. So it's, it kind of depends. I mean, if a person needs to leave the US and come back later with an H, that's also possible. And if you stay 1 year outside the US, you reset your 6 years. That's another thing. Or maybe if the person hasn't yet reached the limit on their H-1B and they have enough time to get a green card process filed and pending for a year, and they have some recapture time, it might work and they might be able to stay in the US and H. I will tell you all that is a separate question, maxing out H-1B time from the lottery, right? They're two totally different elements. So just because you have H-1B time doesn't mean that you can apply for an H without the lottery, right? The lottery is that competitive numbers situation unless you have a cap exempt H-1B, whereas the 6 years issue is just a max out issue of how many years you can hold H-1B status without a green card process being initiated. So that's what I'll say.
Absolutely. It looks like this kind of more personal situations needs to, more need somebody who have the experiences to take a more in-depth look into his case or her case. So if you're interested in a legal consultation, we can also connect you with somebody from Siskind Susser so that you can ask more questions. And then moving on, what is the process like to go from F1 to marriage-based green card? I think we speak on this a little bit. So, and the other part of the question is, can one continue to work on day one CPT while waiting for an EAD and change status to permanent residence? I think both questions, if you wanted to combine these, for example, if you're on day one CPT, wanted to get a marriage-based green card, I think that makes sense if you wanted to go ahead and do that. So, Adam, do you wanted to add anything on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's all feasible, right? You can maintain that status. The only thing that I would tell you all is the international travel is a problem because it can potentially abandon the green card process, and trying to come back, if you're traveling without advanced parole, without a travel document through the green card process, you can abandon it. And then you also might have trouble coming back in F1 because F1's for studying, not for permanent residence. So you have to be mindful of international travel.
Absolutely. Next one, this person wanted to know, is EW3 also an option for green card application for H-1B holders?
I'm not quite sure. W, maybe
I
like an
think
EB3?
maybe this person is referring to EB3.
Yeah, maybe. So, yes, EB3 is just, it's a preference category, right? So it is for um, somebody who is being sponsored for a position that requires a bachelor's degree, or in some cases, even less than a bachelor's degree. It's broken off into bachelor's and then other workers, and that all falls under EB3. So yes.
Sure. All right. Next one. A lot of people ask this, so we're gonna delve into it. Any news about potential second lotteries for this year?
I haven't heard any. I haven't heard any. That doesn't mean there won't be. Last year there was a lottery and nobody had any advance notice. We basically just received emails to check the My USCIS account, and I got a couple more people selected, so I was happy about that. But it hasn't really been there hasn't really been a lot of news or fanfare around any of that.
All right. Next one is also a more general question. So if somebody wanted to go for an EB1
Mhm.
and wanted to start right away, how can they build their profile? I think this would definitely depend on the industry the person in, but can you speak on the general sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now you're right. It's hard to speak too generally about it because it really does depend on the industry. But just note that they're looking at, within your industry, right? They're looking at national and international awards. They're looking at prestigious memberships that you don't just pay a fee and you're in. It's very selective. They're looking at leading in critical roles. They're looking at being a judge of the work of others, right? That you've reviewed in some way the work of your colleagues, having a high salary relative to others, having original contributions of major significance, right? So just kind of being a standout in terms of innovation, research contributions, maybe just depending on the industry. Those are just a few things. So it really does depend, and you can continue to build yourself, and it naturally follows. I find it really follows that as you build your career, you're also building your EB1, right? Especially if you're ambitious like that, career minded, and ambitious in that way, it tends to build the EB1 profile as well.
For sure. I think we are about time, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. I do notice that we have lots of questions came in, so this is good. Even though we haven't answered all of them, so hopefully we can get Adam back on again to give us another one of these wonderful presentations, and we can delve into more questions in the future. So if you have any follow-up questions or you want us to connect you with Adam or Siskind Susser PC, scan the QR code, send us an email, let me know so we can connect you with Adam. And then if you want to ask more questions about Day One CPT, Goalie is here for you. Our consultant can provide free consultations. All right. Thank you so much, Adam. Anything you wanted to say to our audiences?
No, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for the engagement, all these wonderful questions, and I would be delighted to come back, Ryan. And thank you very much for having me. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And everybody have a great night. Hopefully we can see everybody very soon. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adam. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.